Burst, an iconic mechanic in many Arc Sys games. Serving many roles, from combo breaker to reversal, it's gone through plenty of different interpretations. So I wanted to take a closer look at the evolution of bursts in Arc Sys games, focusing primarily on Guilty Gear and BlazBlue. Guilty Gear's bursts have, for the most part, stayed pretty consistent throughout the series. They were first introduced in Guilty Gear XX, which may have been because Guilty Gear 1 is full of infinites and Guilty Gear X has unblockable loops. Bursts in Guilty Gear come in two flavors, Blue Burst and Gold Burst. Both of them are invuln, but they have different uses. Blue Burst is a standard get-off-me tool, and you can use it when you're getting hit or when you're blocking. However, you can't use them when you're getting thrown or when you're getting hit by a super. On top of that, blue bursts are punishable on block, so using one carelessly will get you punished. Gold bursts, on the other hand, can only be done when in a neutral state. It provides a massive meter bonus and allows you to turn the table on the opponent. It's also nearly impossible to punish. Now, XX and Xrd have very similar bursts. Blue bursts refund about 30% of your burst when you hit with it, and gold bursts give you 100% of your meter when you land it, which is a very strong thing to have in Guilty Gear. Xrd did add two new ways to manipulate burst. One way was with burst supers, which are basically a more powerful version of a super by spending your burst. Burst supers have extremely high minimum damage, and combined with the Hellfire state can do ludicrous amounts of damage. Then there's the Blitz attack, which steals some of your opponent's burst on hit. This can be a very convenient way to make your combos burst safe, provided you can squeeze a Blitz attack in there somehow. Now, in older Guilty Gear games, these bursts had a few major flaws. First, bursts cause you to rise up a bit when you perform them. This was a problem because it allowed for some characters to low profile them. Worse, the burst could miss because you went too high and missed the hurt box of a move that wasn't even a low profile. Second, bursts were relatively slow. This meant that some characters had ways to option select with attacks that would recover in time and block the burst, or worse, use armor or invuln to go right through it. Third, burst did not recharge fast at all. You'd probably only see one burst per round at best, unless you were fighting someone like Ramathal who built the opponent burst like mad. Finally, bursts were throwable. See, bursts in older Guilty Gear games were only strike invuln, not throw invuln, which means you could indeed throw someone's burst and steal their soul. And trust me, this feels amazing if you're the one throwing it. So not only do you have to burst carefully, but you also have to watch out for getting thrown, which is tricky because Guilty Gear has a very easy throw option select. Because of this, I understand why people dislike old Guilty Gear bursts. It can feel incredibly frustrating to fight some characters who feel like they're just consistently burst safe no matter what they do. Get out of here! Unbelievable. But I think it adds another layer of mind games to both offense and defense. Some people get super hungry for the burst bait or the soul steal, and it leads to interesting mind games of, will I burst? Will I not burst? Some people would throw entire rounds just desperately trying to bait that burst. Regardless, when Strive rolled around, they made some changes to burst. Burst became faster and therefore harder to naturally bait, and it could no longer be thrown. Although you could throw bursts in the very first build of the game. Plus, you could no longer armor or invuln through them, though you could Red Roman cancel and hit confirm if they were bursting or not. And gold bursts were also made punishable, although this was a bit tricky to do. Aside from that, bursts function mostly the same. But there was a problem. See, there were some characters in Strive who had a combo structure that prevented you from bursting at all. Happy Chaos, Ramathal, and Asuka all had combos that could hit you from all the way across the screen, and it was physically impossible to hit them with a burst. So, the old school burst just wasn't cutting it anymore. Enter Strive Season 3, where the burst gauge got a massive rework. Blue bursts were now full screen, which meant that those three could no longer do a combo that was unburstable due to range. But that also meant that you couldn't low profile a burst anymore. Also, Blue Burst always depleted your entire burst gauge and there was no refund whatsoever. Gold Burst retained the old range, but instead of giving 100% meter, it gave
positive bonus.
It also went back to being practically unpunishable on block. On top of that, positive bonus now gave burst bar on top of regular meter. Wall stick now also gave a little bit of burst. And that's not all. Strive Season 3 added 2 new system mechanics that used 50% of the burst bar when used. Wild Assault, which was a general combo tool for most characters, and Deflect Shield, which shoved the opponent super far away on any kind of hit. Unfortunately, this was a bit messy when it came out. Wild Assault was an insanely strong tool, giving a hard knockdown on wall break, leading to big damage combos, and also stealing burst, a lot of burst, on hit. On top of that, positive bonus regenerated way too much burst meter, leading to very snowbally situation. So they nerfed both, and while Wild Assault is still a very strong tool, some would argue too strong, it's no longer the overwhelming mechanic it used to be. With all of this, burst baiting in Strive is a much harder task now with the changes, which makes burst much more consistent as a defensive tool. Now, with the type of game Strive is, being a bit volatile, I'm okay with burst being better as is. However, there is one change I want. Bring back throwable bursts! Gold Burst is unpunishable on block, so let me throw them. On top of that, let me steal positive bonus when I soul steal. Come on, Arc Sys, give me a break here. Anyways, on to BlazBlue. BlazBlue's bursts, unlike Guilty Gear's bursts, have changed dramatically throughout the years. Starting with Calamity Trigger, we have the Barrier Burst. Unlike in Guilty Gear, where there are 2 different types of bursts, in Calamity Trigger there's technically 3 different types of bursts. Burst in this game is tied to your barrier bar, your dedicated resource for defensive blocking. How strong your burst is depends on how much barrier you have left. If you have full barrier, your burst comes out very fast. If you've used some, but still have around 50% left, your burst is pretty slow. If you have less than 50% burst, your burst is ridiculously slow. On top of that, bursts could be armored and invulned through. You can use the burst offensively and defensively, but you won't use it offensively for 2 major reasons. First, you only get 1 burst per round. There's no recharge, there's no bar that needs to fill up, there's only 1 per round. And second, though my eagle-eyed viewers may have already noticed this, when you burst, you lose your barrier gauge, which in BlazBlue is horrible. Without barrier, you're in the danger state, which means you take extra damage from every kind of attack, and you can't barrier block anymore. This danger state means that some supers can just straight up kill you from like 75% HP, and also, not having barrier block in a game with a top tier Rachel, Nu, and Arcune is a miserable experience. So burst was pretty much a desperation move in a lot of cases, because the drawbacks to burst were huge. Which also goes to show just how scary Carl was, because people were bursting him really early to avoid getting put in the clap loop infinite. Thankfully, when Continuum Shift came out, they reworked the burst mechanic. Burst was now completely divorced from the barrier bar, and was now tied to guard primers, which was this game's version of a guard bar. When you burst, you lost half of your guard primers, which makes it easier to get guard crushed. And while burst was still tied to rounds, you could stockpile your first burst and save it if you lost the first round, leading to a situation where you had 2 bursts you could use, not just 1. While defensive burst was still slow, offensive burst got changed to become a launcher, a very good launcher actually, that could lead to some pretty fancy combos. However, I suppose that Arc Sys was not satisfied with this burst system, so when Chrono Phantasma rolled around, they changed it again. This time, burst was a straightforward bar that filled up just like Guilty Gear, and the speed increased dramatically. It was now a lot harder to bait due to the speed, requiring more hard callouts. But where things really changed was with the offensive portion of burst. Gold Burst was removed, and in its place was Overdrive. Overdrive was basically a universal install mechanic, similar to Dark Forces in Vampire Savior. The activation was invincible, and it gave every character unique buffs. It also made their supers much better. The duration got longer the less health you had, which allowed for a comeback mechanic, and it prevented the opponent from bursting while the overdrive was active. Not to mention the fact that it froze the timer while the overdrive was active. And compared to burst, it refunded you 30% of your burst bar when it finished. Now, this is just a bit of personal preference, but I have a few issues with overdrive as a mechanic. For one, it makes old install supers like Blood Cane less unique because they're just overdrives now. Furin Kazan especially suffered for this because Bang basically lost his old gimmick. Before, he had to unlock all his seals before he could activate Furin Kazan, but now it was just an overdrive and it felt less meaningful. The other issue is that not all overdrives were created equal. You have overdrives like New where they were just like, she gets better, I guess. And then you had overdrives like Hakumen where, well...
Unit 起動
Her name is Hakuman, a soldier resurrected to a violent, devastated world. They call him Hakuman, restoring order over chaos, calm the forces of discord. Destroy and idle the evil soul.
It led to a disparity that Arc Sys took note of because they buffed Overdrive in Chrono Phantasma Extend. Now there was Overdrive Raid, which was a guard cancel version that lets you invuln through certain moves and punish, although at the cost of overdrive time. However, I do think this makes pressure a bit obnoxious to structure as you have to constantly be worried about whiffing a move through Overdrive Raid and eating a souped up combo. However, I'm also a Tager player that can abuse the hell out of this, so... Central Fiction retained the burst system of Chrono Phantasma, but added onto it with Exceed Excel and Active Flow. Exceed Excel is a universal attack with invincibility that helps characters without reversals post-overdrive. Once you land in Exceed Excel, you receive
Active Flow!
Active Flow is a buff state where all your attacks do more damage and you regenerate burst very fast. On top of that, being in Active Flow makes your Exceed Excel go from around 2k damage to 4,000 damage. However, you can't get Active Flow if you burst, if you've been in negative penalty, or if you've already received Active Flow this round. Exceed Excel used to be incredibly obnoxious, as many of them were very hard to punish on launch. It's better now, so you don't just have an incredibly safe reversal that can do up to 4,000 damage. And Active Flow is a bit odd. There's only two guaranteed ways of getting Active Flow: landing at Exceed Excel or if the opponent goes into negative penalty. But how you activate it otherwise is a bit arcane. Basically, there's a little invisible bar that fills up by you doing defensive and offensive actions. However, because this bar is invisible, the only indication that you're going to get Active Flow is this little attention that pops up. I'm not the biggest fan of Active Flow because it's not exactly clear or controllable when you're going to get Active Flow outside of Exceed Excel. This may be a hot take, but I feel like Positive Bonus is a better implementation of this sort of mechanic, as it's a lot clearer as to when you're going to get it. Regardless, I think Active Flow's influence on burst management is actually pretty interesting. Bursts are crazy strong in Central Fiction, but sacrificing Overdrive and Active Flow is a pretty hefty cost. So you'll often see people hang on to their burst, only using it when necessary. In fact, I think this is what they were trying to do with Calamity Trigger's burst, except, you know, the burst isn't terrible. But there was a sacrifice. You can't armor through bursts anymore. Rest in peace, Voltic Charge Burst Bait.
Sorry, Kokonoe.
Now there's two other Arc Sys bursts I want to talk about, starting with Persona 4 Arena. At first glance, the burst seems to be almost identical to Guilty Gear's burst. But there's one unique little aspect that I think is really neat. Persona's burst can be used as a Roman cancel-like attack called a One More Burst, giving you an extra cancel option for big combos, or for when you don't have enough meter to do a regular One More cancel. It's a nice way of getting alternative uses for burst meter. And then there's Shadow Frenzy. Persona 4 has alternate versions of every character called Shadows. These Shadow characters have some distinct differences, but the major difference is that instead of a regular burst, they have Shadow Frenzy. What Shadow Frenzy does is that it replaces your meter with a purple bar. For as long as that bar is full, you have unlimited meter. There are some insane TODs you can get from abusing super into super into super. It's a ridiculously strong mechanic, and Shadow characters don't have regular burst to accommodate for that. Oh wait, that's right. For some reason, Arc Sys thought that Shadow characters needed a regular burst on top of Shadow Frenzy in 2.0. And, lo and behold, almost all the top tier characters are now Shadow characters. Wow, who could have seen this coming? The last burst I want to talk about is, well, I wasn't sure if it would fit in the video. Dragon Ball FighterZ has the mechanic called the Sparking Burst. You can perform it while doing a combo as a launcher, or while blocking or in neutral as a get-off-me tool. When you perform sparking, your character gets hella buffed and allows for some pretty sick combos. But there's one key aspect I didn't mention that makes me hesitate. You can't burst while getting hit, which to me is one of the most important factors of a burst mechanic. So, I wasn't even sure if I should put it in this vid. At best, I'd call it kind of a burst. What do you think? Personally, I love to look at how bursts have evolved throughout the years. I'm curious to see how this mechanic will be implemented in future Arc Sys games like Marvel Tokon. In the meantime, keep baiting those bursts, y'all. Thanks for watching.